My name is Grace Reed. I'm 34 years old, and I am the oldest grandchild, the one who drove 40 minutes each way every Thursday for 3 years, the one who kept the medication log in a spiral notebook with color-coded tabs, and the one who was told, in a group chat I couldn't respond to because my sister had already removed me, that I was not welcome at my grandmother's funeral. The message came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the hospital break room, still in scrubs from a 12-hour overnight shift, eating a granola bar I didn't taste. My phone buzzed twice, then a third time. I didn't look at it immediately because I thought it was the scheduling system. When I finally turned the screen over, I saw 42 notifications from the family group chat, the one called the Andersons, all of us, and then I saw that I was no longer a member of it. A cousin, Patrice, sent me a screenshot 20 minutes later. She added no message, just the image. My sister Dana had written, at 6:47 in the morning, I've talked to everyone. We all agree it's better if Grace doesn't come. She made the last 2 years harder than they needed to be, and Grandma's service should be peaceful. I'll let her know separately. She never let me know separately. Below Dana's message were 11 replies. Every aunt, both uncles, 6 cousins, each one a variation of agreed or yes, or a single thumbs-up emoji. My mother's reply was the one that made the granola bar turn to paste in my mouth. She had written, I think that's the right call, Dana. Love you. I set my phone face down on the break room table. The fluorescent light above me buzzed the way it always did, a low and slightly off-key hum that I had never minded before and suddenly couldn't stand. I pressed my hands flat against the table. I did not cry. I had been awake for 14 hours, and I was in my work clothes, and the grief for my grandmother had already been sitting in my chest for 9 days, since the morning she died, and I was not going to add anything to it in a hospital break room. I drove home. I showered. I stood in my kitchen for a long time looking at the coffee maker without turning it on. Then I drove to Grandma's house. I had a key. I had carried that key on my keyring for 2 years and 4 months, ever since the October morning Grandma called me at 5 a.m. and said she couldn't feel her left hand properly and didn't want to bother anyone. I was the one who drove her to the ER. I was the one who sat in the waiting room for 6 hours and then drove her home and called her primary care doctor from the car. The key went onto my ring that same afternoon because she pressed it into my palm in the driveway and said, just in case, and neither of us said anything else about it. The house still smelled like her. Lavender sachets and old wood, and the particular warmth of a small house that has been lived in by the same person for 41 years. I stood in the doorway for a moment and let that land. The family had been through the house already. I could tell by the way the living room looked. The surfaces slightly disturbed, the cabinet by the television left open, a chair moved 6 inches from where Grandma always kept it. They had been through it and taken what they wanted, and no one had called me. I walked to the bedroom. The nightstand drawer was still closed. I had hoped it would be. I opened it slowly, and the envelope was exactly where I had last seen it, on a Sunday afternoon 7 weeks before Grandma died, when she had pressed it to the bottom of the drawer beneath her rosary and her blood pressure log, and said, that stays there until I say otherwise, Gracie. You're the one who keeps things. I had nodded and closed the drawer and never mentioned it again. The envelope was cream-colored and thick, sealed with a wax stamp I recognized, the raised H of Hargrove and Associates, the law firm on Clement Street that Grandma had used for 30 years. Her name was written on the front in her own handwriting, and below it, in the firm's printed label, Estate of Eleanor May Reed, sealed correspondence, to be opened upon direction of counsel. I did not open it. I knew what it contained in the way you know the contents of a room you have walked through 100 times, not from reading it, but from being present when it was made. I had driven Grandma to that office on a Wednesday morning 14 months ago, waited in a chair in the reception area reading a 2-year-old magazine while she was inside for 50 minutes, and driven her home again. In the car she had said, I did what I should have done a long time ago, and I feel better. I had said, good. She had reached over and patted my hand on the gear shift. That was all. I held the envelope for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the stiffness of whatever was folded inside. Then I slipped it into my bag. If they had already been through the house, I was not leaving it here. I sat in my car in Grandma's driveway for a while. The street was quiet. A neighbor walked a small dog past the end of the drive and didn't look up. The ash tree in the front yard had lost most of its leaves, and the remaining ones moved in a slow, tired way in the November wind. I watched them. My phone rang. It was my mother. I answered because I was still, at 34 years old, someone who answered when her mother called. "Grace," she said. Her voice was the careful kind, not warm, but not sharp either. The voice she used when she had already decided something and was informing me of it rather than discussing it. "I want you to hear this from me. The service is Thursday. It's a private family gathering, and we think it's best if you give everyone some space." "Grandma's funeral," I said. "The memorial, yes. That I'm not invited to." She paused. "We just think, given everything, it would be a smoother day without me." "Grace, you have a way of making things about yourself, and this day needs to be about Grandma." I looked at the ash tree. One leaf let go and turned twice before it hit the ground. I said nothing. "I hope you understand," my mother said. I didn't answer. I let that sit between us on the line, 20 full seconds of silence until she said, "Grace," in a slightly different register, and I said, "I heard you," and ended the call. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. Welcome back to Channel, where calm women face loud cruelty and the truth takes its time, but it never misses. If you have ever been the person who showed up quietly for years and still got voted out when it counted, this story is for you. Drop a comment below. I read everyone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because there are more stories coming and I don't want you to miss them. Now, let's keep going. I want to tell you what I did on Thursday, the day of my grandmother's funeral. I got up at 6:30. I made coffee and drank it at my kitchen table in the gray November light. I put on a black dress, the one I had bought specifically weeks ago when I still assumed I would be there, and I drove to the church. Not inside. I parked across the street, in the lot of a dry cleaner that didn't open until 9, and I sat in my car and watched the family arrive. I watched Dana walk in on my uncle's arm, wearing Grandma's pearl earrings. I recognized them from 15 feet away because I had helped Grandma clasp them at Easter for the last 4 years. I sat there for 2 hours. I did not go in. I was not going to give any of them the satisfaction of a scene, and I was not going to give myself the grief of being turned away at the door of a church where my grandmother was lying in a casket. So I watched the door from across the street, and when the service was over and they all filed out into the pale November sun, I started my car and drove away before anyone could look across and see me. That was the day of my grandmother's funeral. I was 34 years old, and I sat in a parking lot across the street, and I watched through a windshield. The call from Dana came 4 days after the funeral, on a Monday evening, while I was making dinner. I heard her voice, and something in me had gone very still. Not calm, exactly, but the stillness of a person who has decided to listen before deciding anything else. "I want to talk about the house," she said, without preamble. I turned the burner down. "What about it?" "We've been in touch with a realtor. The family has decided to list it. We're thinking spring, so we'd want to start clearing it out by February." "The family decided," I said. "Yes. Everyone's in agreement." I thought about the key still on my ring. I thought about the envelope in the top drawer of my home office, the cream-colored one with the wax seal, which I had not touched since the night I brought it home from Grandma's nightstand. "Did anyone talk to a lawyer?" I asked. There was a small pause. "We'll go through Hargrove when we're closer to the sale. They handled Grandma's will years ago. They'll just need to process the estate." I said. "It shouldn't be complicated," Dana said. Her voice had the quality of someone delivering a briefing to a person who is not technically in the meeting but has been allowed to listen. "Grandma didn't have much. The house, a small savings account, some furniture. We're going to split it 4 ways. That's you, me, Mom, and Uncle Richard." "4 ways," I said. "Yes. I think that's fair." I didn't answer. "Grace, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said. "Do you have any concerns?" I looked at the pot on the stove. The water was starting to simmer at the edges, not boiling yet, just the first small movements along the bottom. "No," I said. She waited, as though she expected more. When I didn't offer it, she said, "Good. I'll be in touch when we have the realtor's timeline. and she said goodbye and hung up. I turned the burner back up. I stood at the stove, and I thought about 14 months ago. A Wednesday. A law firm on Clement Street. Grandma in the passenger seat saying, "I did what I should have done a long time ago." Dana did not know I had been in that car. Dana did not know what was in the drawer. Dana did not know a great number of things, and I had decided, standing at my stove on a Monday evening, that she would continue not knowing them for a while longer. My Uncle Richard called 2 days later. His approach was different from Dana's, warmer in tone, which made it more difficult in its own way. "Gracie," he said, and just the sound of that name in his voice, the name Grandma had always used, put a pressure behind my eyes that I had to breathe through slowly. "I want you to know I wasn't entirely comfortable with how Thursday was handled." "Thank you for saying that," I said. "You should have been there. She was your grandmother, too." "Yes," I said. "She was." A pause. "But what's done is done. And I'm calling because Dana mentioned she'd spoken to you about the estate, and I just want to make sure you know you're included. This isn't going to be one of those situations where the family—" "I know," I said. "I appreciate you calling." "Of course." Another pause. "You know, Dana means well. She just has a way of—" "Uncle Richard," I said carefully, "I know." I said nothing more. He said he was glad we'd talked and that he'd be in touch, and we hung up, and I sat with the particular weight of a man who was kind but would not, when it came to it, do anything differently than Dana asked. I had met that combination before. Kindness without friction. Warmth without spine. I understood it. I did not count on it. The realtor's name was Patty Carmichael, and she called me the following Thursday. Not as a courtesy, I understood, but because Dana had apparently listed me as a co-contact, probably to prevent me from claiming later that I hadn't been informed. I had 3 minutes with Patty Carmichael, and she was efficient and cheerful and told me the house in its current condition would list around $340,000, possibly up to $380,000 if they did cosmetic updates. "We'd want to do a walkthrough the first week of February," she said. "Will that work for your schedule?" "I'll make it work," I said. "Wonderful. The family's very motivated." "I'm sure they are," I said. I said nothing else. I noted the date. I wrote it in my planner, in the column where I kept my hospital shifts and my bill due dates and the small, logistical facts of a life organized around reliability. Dana called once more that week. A Friday. She wanted to know if I had any personal items at Grandma's house that I wanted to collect before February. "A few things," I said. "Can you get them by the end of January?" "Yes." "And you won't take anything that belongs to the estate?" I let a beat pass. "Like what?" "Just furniture, anything of real value. The family needs to go through it properly." "I understand," I said. I did not say anything else. I did not tell her that I had already removed the one item of real consequence. I did not tell her about the cream-colored envelope in my home office, the one with the raised H pressed into the wax, the one I had been the witness to without ever being the reader of. I said I understood. I said goodbye. I let her hang up first. Something in me had grown very quiet, not resigned, but particular. The way water goes quiet before it finds the lowest point. I need to tell you what 3 years actually looked like. Not in summary. In the specific texture of it, the way it accumulated Thursday by Thursday until it was simply the shape of my life. The first year began in October, when Grandma called at 5 in the morning and I drove to her house in the dark and found her sitting at her kitchen table in her nightgown with her left hand pressed flat against the tabletop, testing the feeling in each finger. She had been sitting there since 3 a.m., she told me. She had not wanted to bother anyone. "You're not bothering me?" I said. "You have work tomorrow." "I have work today," I said. "In 5 hours. Come on." I drove her to St. Catherine's. I signed her in at the ER desk and sat in the waiting room for 6 hours and 20 minutes. I had brought nothing to read. I watched the television mounted in the corner, a morning news program that cycled through the same 3 segments twice, and I drank bad coffee from a vending machine, and I did not call anyone in the family because Grandma had specifically said, "Don't make a fuss, Gracie, it's probably nothing," and I had agreed to her terms. It was a minor TIA, not nothing. The neurologist used the phrase warning event, and Grandma listened with the focused attention she brought to everything and asked 2 sharp questions and thanked him. In the car on the way home, she said she supposed she would need to change some things. "We'll figure it out," I said. She patted my hand on the gear shift. That was the beginning. For the next 11 months, I drove to her house every Thursday, without exception. 40 minutes each way. I rearranged 2 shifts to make it work, traded a Tuesday for a Thursday with a colleague named Marcus 3 separate times, until Marcus started checking the schedule on Tuesdays out of habit, and we didn't need to negotiate it anymore. I kept a spiral notebook with color-coded tabs, one for medications, one for appointments, one for what I thought of as the running inventory, the things that needed doing, the things that had been done, the things she didn't want me to bring up again. In February of the first year, the bathroom floor showed soft spots near the base of the toilet. Grandma had noticed it 6 months earlier and not said anything because she didn't want to be a burden. I found out because I went to get a towel from the cabinet and felt the floor give slightly under my left foot. I rented a tile saw from a hardware store on a Saturday morning. I had never used a tile saw. I watched 4 videos the night before and took notes on my phone. I drove back to Grandma's house Saturday afternoon with $43 worth of replacement tile and a bag of grout and 2 tubes of caulk, and I spent 7 hours on my knees on that bathroom floor. Grandma brought me a glass of water at 2 in the afternoon and stood in the doorway watching me work and said, "You didn't have to do all this, Gracie." "I know," I said from the floor. I had a piece of tile in one hand and a grout float in the other, and my knees had gone numb an hour ago. "Your sister doesn't know how to do any of that," she said, in a tone that wasn't unkind, just factual. "Different skills," I said. She made a small sound that wasn't agreement or disagreement, and went back to the kitchen. I finished at 9:30 that night. I drove home in the dark with grout in my hair and a soreness in my lower back that lasted 4 days. I did not tell anyone in the family I had done it because there was no natural way to bring it up and because Grandma hadn't asked me to broadcast it. It was a bathroom floor. It needed doing. I had done it. The medication situation required more sustained attention. Grandma took 7 medications after the TIA. 3 in the morning, 2 at noon, 2 at night. She was meticulous about most things, but the noon medications drifted. She would be busy or distracted or simply forget, and then she would double up in the evening to compensate, which her cardiologist had told her twice not to do. I found out about the pattern in month 3 when I went through her pill organizer on a Thursday, and the Wednesday noon compartment was still full. I called her pharmacist. I called her cardiologist's nurse. I ordered a medication management app on her tablet and spent 2 Thursdays setting it up, and then 1 more Thursday walking her through it until she could navigate it without me standing over her shoulder. The alarms were set to her ringtone, a piece of music she had heard in a commercial once and liked, something orchestral and bright, so that she would associate the sound with something pleasant rather than something medical. That was her idea. I thought it was a good one. For 8 months, I checked the pill organizer every Thursday. Not to verify that she was failing, but because that was what responsible people did with medication logs. The way a nurse checks a chart, not because she doubts the patient, but because charts are what you use when memory is insufficient. Grandma never missed a noon dose after month 4. She thanked me once for the app. Just once, on a Thursday in the spring, when she said, "That little alarm has been very helpful." I said I was glad. She said, "You're very organized, Gracie." I said I had learned it from her. She looked pleased by that. I did not tell Dana about the medication system. Dana called Grandma every Sunday and asked how she was feeling, and Grandma always said fine, sweetheart, just fine, and Dana believed her, and that was the shape of it. In the second year, there were 2 hospitalizations. The first was April, a UTI that became septic faster than anyone anticipated. I got the call on a Wednesday night from a neighbor, Mrs. Palermo, who had found Grandma confused at her back door at 8 in the evening. I drove to St. Catharines and stayed until 2 in the morning and came back at 7 the next morning and stayed through the day. She was there for 4 days. I took 2 of those days as PTO. I sat with her and kept the nursing staff informed of her baseline status, her medication list, her allergy to sulfa drugs, the fact that she ran cold and needed an extra blanket even when her temperature was elevated. Dana called on the second day. "How is she?" "Better," I said. "She's responding to the antibiotics." God, I'm so glad. I'm going to try to get up there this weekend, if I can make it work. Okay, I said. Dana did not make it that weekend. A scheduling conflict, she said in a text. She came the following Tuesday for 2 hours and brought Grandma a plant and a magazine. Grandma was already home by then. I had arranged the home health aide for the first 2 weeks and trained the aide on the medication schedule and the app and the particular way Grandma liked her evening medications, with a small glass of juice, not water, because water alone made her nauseous. I did not relay any of this to Dana.
There was no reason to.
The aide knew what she needed to know. Grandma was comfortable. The system worked. The plant Dana brought was a peace lily. It died in 6 weeks. Grandma didn't mention it. By the 3rd year, I had rearranged my Thursday shifts 11 times. I had made 41 round trips, 40 minutes each way, between my apartment and Grandma's house. I had attended 22 medical appointments, sat in 14 waiting rooms, filled 4 spiral notebooks. I had retiled the bathroom floor and replaced a kitchen faucet that had developed a slow leak and cleared the gutters twice with a rented extension ladder, once in the fall and once in the spring, because Grandma's roof had a slope that turned standing water into a problem very quickly. I had not asked for any of this to be acknowledged.
I want to be precise about that.
I did not do it for acknowledgement. I did it because she was my grandmother, and she had nobody else who showed up with the particular combination of time and competence and willingness that the situation required. But I did keep the notebooks. The color-coded ones. I kept them because I was a nurse and that was how I was trained to document. Because documentation was what made care real in a legal and medical sense. Because my grandmother had pressed a key into my palm in a driveway and said just in case, and I had understood that just in case sometimes meant something specific, and I wanted to be ready for the specific thing. I had 41 trip logs, 22 appointment records, a medication management history going back 27 months, 4 notebooks in a box in my home office. Beside the box, in the top drawer of my desk, was a cream-colored envelope with a wax seal and the raised letter H and my grandmother's handwriting on the front. I had not opened it. I would not open it. But I knew the date on the documents inside, because I had been there when they were made, and I knew what my grandmother had said in the car on the way home, and I knew that she was a woman who had spent 41 years in that house making careful decisions, and had spent the last 14 months of her life making one more. I was the one who kept things. I kept the envelope. I kept the notebooks. I kept the key. And I waited. January came in gray and cold, and the family began moving through Grandma's house the way people move through a place they have already decided belongs to them. Dana coordinated it. She sent a shared document, a Google spreadsheet with columns for item, estimated value, and assigned family member, and she sent it to everyone except me, and then, 2 days later, forwarded it to me with a note that said, "Just so you're in the loop." I opened it and read through it twice. The pearl earrings were listed under Dana's name. The writing desk from the upstairs bedroom, the one Grandma had used every morning for 40 years, was listed under my mother's name. The china cabinet, the rocking chair, the mirror in the front hallway, all assigned, all decided, all done in a document I had not been part of creating. My name appeared once, in the assigned column next to miscellaneous kitchen items, lower cabinet, left side. I closed the spreadsheet and set my laptop aside and sat for a moment with my hands in my lap. Then I called my Uncle Richard. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice carrying the slightly guilty warmth of a man who had been expecting this call for a while. "Gracie," he said. "I got the spreadsheet," I said. A pause.
Yes.
Dana put that together. "It's a starting point, it's not final. My name is next to the lower left kitchen cabinet." "I know." He cleared his throat. "I want you to know I flagged that. I said you should have more of a say." "What did Dana say?" Another pause, longer. "She said you hadn't been around much the last couple of years, and that the people who were present should have first choice." I let that sentence exist in the air between us for a full 5 seconds. I said nothing. "Gracie, I know that's not accurate. You were there. I know you were there." "Yes," I said. "But Dana is the one who organized everything after Grandma passed, and she's just driving this process, and it's easier to let her." I understood. I had understood before I called. I had called because I wanted to hear the shape of it directly, not because I expected it to change anything.
Okay, I said.
Give it a little time. Once the estate is processed. Okay, Uncle Richard, I said. He said a few more things. I listened. He told me I was being very gracious about it, and something behind my sternum pulled tight in a way I recognized as the particular ache of being called gracious by someone who is choosing not to act. I thanked him for calling me back. We said goodbye. I sat in my kitchen for a while after that. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went slowly down the street in the gray January afternoon, its tires wet on the pavement. I watched the light change on the wall opposite the window, a slow, incremental dimming as the clouds thickened. Then I got up and made dinner, and went to bed at 10 o'clock. My mother called on a Saturday morning, 10 days before the February walkthrough. I was at the laundromat, sitting on the bench between the dryers with a book I had not been reading when her name appeared on my screen. I answered, Grace. Her voice was the careful version again, the administrative one. I want to check in about February. Patty said you confirmed the walkthrough date. I did, I said. Good. A brief pause. I also want to say I know the last few months have been hard, and I know you've had feelings about how things were handled. I looked at the dryer across from me, the clothes turning slowly behind the round glass door. A red sock appeared and disappeared and appeared again. I said. I want you to know that Dana made that decision from a place of love. She wanted the service to be peaceful. She didn't mean it as an attack on you. She organized a vote in a group chat to ban me from my grandmother's funeral, I said, and then removed me from the chat, so I couldn't respond. A short silence. That's one way to look at it, my mother said. I watched the red sock turn. I said nothing. Grace, I'm trying to extend an olive branch here. Can you meet me halfway? I heard you, I said. That's not the same as. I know, I said. My mother made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite a word, and she shifted to talking about the walkthrough logistics. Patty would be there at 10. They hoped to be done by noon. There would be some discussion about staging costs. I listened and said yes where yes was required and gave nothing additional. When she hung up, I sat for another minute watching the laundry turn, and then I moved it to the folding table and folded it in the particular neat way Grandma had taught me when I was 9 years old, thirds and then thirds again, hospital corners on the fitted sheet. I thought about the word gracious. I thought about what it meant to the people who used it to describe me, and what it meant to me, and how those two meanings had almost no overlap. The walkthrough was on a Thursday, a coincidence that felt appropriate in a way I couldn't have explained. I drove to Grandma's house for the 42nd time. The morning was cold and bright, the sky a clean pale blue, and the ash tree in the front yard was bare and very still. They were all there when I arrived. Dana, my mother, Uncle Richard, and Patty Carmichael, who was brisk and pleasant and clipboard equipped. Patty shook my hand and said she was glad to meet me and moved efficiently into the front hallway to begin her assessment. Dana looked at me when I walked in. Her expression was controlled, not hostile, but not open. The expression of a person who had expected resistance and was prepared to manage it. Grace, she said. Dana, I said. We stood in Grandma's front hallway, the smell of lavender still there, faint but present, and the light coming in through the window the way it had come in every Thursday for 3 years, and I looked at the mirror on the wall, the one Dana had put in the spreadsheet under her name, and I kept my face still. Patty walked the house. She made notes on her clipboard. She talked about the kitchen counters, the bathroom tile. Oh, this is in excellent shape. Was this recently redone? And the gutters, which she said appeared to have been well maintained. Dana said yes, of course. The family had kept on top of things. I watched Patty write something and said nothing. The bathroom floor. The gutters. The medication system that had kept Grandma's hospital readmission rate at 0 for 26 months. I said nothing. At the end of the walkthrough, Patty said the house was in better condition than she'd expected and revised her estimate upward, $390, possibly $400 if they did fresh paint in the main bedroom. Dana looked pleased. My mother touched her arm. Uncle Richard caught my eye across the room. He gave a small nod that I understood to mean, "You're being good about this." I looked back at him steadily until he looked away. I drove home with the ash tree in my rearview mirror and the envelope still in my desk drawer and the particular patience of someone who had learned, over 3 years of Thursday drives and waiting rooms and medication logs, that timing was a form of care. I called Hargrove and Associates on a Monday morning in mid-February from my car, parked outside the hospital before my shift. I had looked the firm up the week before, not because I didn't know who they were, but because I wanted to confirm the current attorney handling Grandma's estate. The website listed 4 names. I recognized one of them, Patricia Hargrove, the founder's daughter, who had been there when I had driven Grandma to that appointment 14 months ago. I had seen her name on the reception desk placard while I waited. The receptionist put me through to a paralegal named Sonia, who was careful and neutral in the way that legal offices train their staff to be. "I'm Grace Reed," I said. "Eleanor Reed was my grandmother. I'm calling about her estate." "Yes, Ms. Reed," Sonia said. "We've been expecting contact from the family. Are you represented by counsel?" "Not currently," I said. "I'm trying to understand the process. Can you tell me whether the estate has been formally opened?" "I can confirm that we have documents on file," Sonia said. "I'm not able to share specifics without authorization from the estate attorney. What I can tell you is that Ms. Hargrove is the attorney of record, and she'll be reaching out to relevant parties in due course." "In due course," I said. "Yes, ma'am." "Can I ask, has the family contacted your office?" "Dana Reed, specifically?" A brief pause. "I'm not able to confirm or discuss other parties' contact with this office." "Understood," I said. I sat with that for a moment. The hospital entrance was 20 feet ahead of me, the automatic doors opening and closing as staff came and went in the early morning cold. "Is there a way for me to formally request contact with Ms. Hargrove?" I asked. "You can send a written request to the office," Sonia said. "Address it to Ms. Hargrove directly. Include your full legal name, your relationship to the deceased, and a daytime phone number." "I'll do that," I said. "Thank you." I went into my shift. I worked 12 hours. I started 2 IVs, managed 4 triage assessments, talked a 23-year-old through a panic attack, and ate a sandwich in 8 minutes in the break room. I did not think about the estate or the envelope or Dana all day, because the floor required my whole attention, and because I had learned, somewhere in my first year of nursing, that compartmentalization was not avoidance, it was precision. You put the thing in the correct drawer, and you close the drawer, and you open the other one. I wrote the letter to Patricia Hargrove that evening. Single page, no embellishment. My name. My relationship to Eleanor Reed. A note that I had been my grandmother's primary caregiver for 36 months, and that I had reason to believe the estate documents might require my direct involvement. My phone number. My email. I drove to a FedEx office and sent it certified mail and kept the receipt. 3 days passed. Then 4. On the 5th day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, a 415 area code, mid-afternoon while I was between patients. "Ms. Reed," said a woman's voice, measured and unhurried. "This is Patricia Hargrove. I received your letter." I stepped into a supply alcove off the main corridor and pressed my back against the shelving. "Thank you for calling," I said. "I want to be straightforward with you," she said. "I can't discuss the specific contents of your grandmother's estate documents over the phone, and I can't do so without all relevant parties present. But I can tell you that your letter was noted, and that we will be in contact with the family very soon." "Soon," I said. "Within the next 3 weeks." "Can I ask, has anyone from my family already been to your office?" A pause that told me more than her answer. "I'm not in a position to share that." "Understood," I said. "Ms. Reed," she said, "I'd encourage you to be patient. The process will move at the pace it needs to move." "I've been patient," I said. There was something in her silence after that, not uncomfortable exactly, but attentive. The silence of someone who had heard a great deal in a small number of words. "I'll be in touch," she said. "I'll be here," I said. I went back to my patients. I finished my shift. I drove home in the dark and I did not open the desk drawer, but I sat for a moment in my office chair and looked at it, the way you look at something you have decided to trust. 2 weeks after the call from Patricia Hargrove, I received a certified letter from Hargrove and Associates. It was brief. It informed me that a formal estate meeting had been scheduled for the third Saturday in March at 10 a.m. at the firm's offices on Clement Street. All interested parties had been notified. My attendance was requested. I read the letter twice. I set it on my desk beside the box of spiral notebooks. I called Dana that evening, not because I expected anything useful from the conversation, but because I wanted to know what she knew. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice had the tightness of someone who had just gotten off another call. "Grace," she said, "did you get a letter from Hargrove?" I asked. "Yes." A pause. "It's a formality. They need all the names present before they can finalize the sale process. Standard estate procedure." I said. "I looked it up," she said. "When someone dies intestate, without a valid will, the estate is distributed according to state law. Since Grandma didn't leave anything recent, it'll go by family structure. That means Richard and Mom as the primary heirs, and then us as grandchildren." I said nothing. "It's actually pretty straightforward," Dana said. Her voice had loosened into the register she used when she was explaining something she considered settled. "I talked to a friend who's a paralegal, and she said these meetings are usually over in an hour." "Good to know," I said. "You're not going to make this difficult, are you, Grace?" I waited one beat. 2. "No," I said. "Good." She seemed to relax slightly. "I know we've had our issues, but this is just the practical part. Grandma would want us to handle it like adults." "She would," I said. We said goodbye. After I hung up, I sat with the phrase "didn't leave anything recent" and turned it over slowly, examining it the way I examined a patient's chart when something didn't line up, not rushing, not reacting, just reading. Dana thought Grandma had died intestate. Dana had talked to a paralegal friend. Dana had counted the votes and drawn the spreadsheet and assigned the pearl earrings to herself and built an entire architecture on a foundation she hadn't checked. I did not open the desk drawer, but I rested my hand on it for a moment, just briefly, feeling the wood grain under my palm, and then I went to make dinner. March arrived, and I prepared the way I prepared for things that mattered. I requested the Thursday before the Saturday meeting as a day off. My charge nurse, a practical woman named Yvette, who had known me for 6 years, approved it without comment. I spent the day at my kitchen table going through the spiral notebooks, not to remind myself of what I knew, but to organize what I had into a form that could be referenced quickly if needed. Dates, appointment logs, the medication management history, the home repair receipts I had kept in the back pocket of the fourth notebook out of habit. I photocopied everything at the FedEx office. 2 sets of copies. One set went into a manila folder. The other set went into a second manila folder that I left in my car. I did not open the desk drawer. I did not touch the envelope. I had already spent 14 months living adjacent to what was in it. I knew the date of the appointment because I had driven Grandma there. I knew what she had said in the car on the way home. I knew the name of the firm on the letterhead because I had read it on the reception desk placard while I waited. I did not need to open it to carry it correctly. I was the one who kept things, and the thing she had given me to keep was not just paper, it was timing. On the Friday before the Saturday meeting, Dana sent a text to me and Uncle Richard and my mother. "Just a reminder about tomorrow. Hargrove's office, 10 a.m., 222 Clement Street. Dress appropriately. Bring ID. This should be brief." My mother replied with a thumbs up. Uncle Richard replied, "See you all there." I replied, "I'll be there." Dana sent back, "Great. Let's just keep it calm and let the lawyers do their job." I set my phone on the counter and went to bed at 9:30. I set my alarm for 7. I laid out my clothes, black slacks, a gray blouse, the low-heeled shoes I wore to meetings that required me to stand for long periods without shifting. I filled a water bottle. I put the manila folder in my bag. I slept without difficulty. This was not bravery. It was the particular rest that comes when a person has done everything that can be done in advance and understands that the next thing is simply to arrive. I want to tell you what Dana did not know on that Friday night. She did not know that Patricia Hargrove had called me a second time on a Wednesday afternoon 2 weeks after our first conversation and said, "Ms. Reed, I want to prepare you. Tomorrow's meeting may be somewhat involved. I'd encourage you to bring anything you feel might be relevant to your relationship with your grandmother's estate." I had said, "What kind of anything?" "Documentation," she said. "Records of care. Correspondence. Anything that establishes the nature and duration of your involvement." I had said, "I have that." She had said, "Good." That was the whole conversation. 45 seconds. But in those 45 seconds, something in my chest had unknotted in a way it hadn't in 4 months. A slow release, like a held breath finally let go. I did not tell Dana about that call. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell Uncle Richard, who would have meant well and said something to Dana by Thursday evening. I went to work and finished my shift and came home and added the date and time of that call to the 4th notebook in the running inventory column and closed the notebook and put it back in the box. The morning of the Saturday meeting, I drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks from Hargrove and Associates and sat for 30 minutes with a black coffee and the manila folder on the table in front of me. I did not open the folder. I already knew what was in it. I watched the street through the window. February had finally let go, and the morning had the tentative brightness of early March, the kind of light that came in low and sideways and made everything look slightly more deliberate than it was. A woman walked past with a stroller. A man unlocked the gate of a flower stand across the street, rolling it back on its hinges with a metallic scrape that I could hear faintly through the glass. I thought about the 40-second Thursday drive. I thought about the bathroom floor and the 7-hour towel job and my knees going numb. I thought about Grandma in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, saying I did what I should have done a long time ago, and I feel better. I thought about the key on my keyring. I did not think about Dana, or my mother, or what the room at Hargrove and Associates would look like when I walked in. I had found, over 3 years of hard Thursdays, that the most efficient way to enter a difficult room was to arrive at it from a place of complete familiarity with your own record. Not defensiveness. Not argument. Just, here's what I did, here is when I did it. Here are the 41 trip logs and the 4 notebooks and the receipts from the hardware store where I bought $43 worth of bathroom tile on a Saturday morning because the floor needed doing, and I was the one who showed up. I finished my coffee. I capped my pen. I put the folder back in my bag without opening it. At 9:52, I put on my coat, picked up my bag, and walked the 2 blocks to 222 Clement Street. The door to Hargrove and Associates was a heavy wooden one, dark-stained, with a brass handle. I pulled it open and stepped inside. The receptionist looked up.
"Grace Reed," I said.
"I have a 10 o'clock. "Of course, Ms. Reed." She smiled and gestured toward a hallway. "They're just getting settled. Conference room B, second door on the left." I walked down the hallway. My footsteps were quiet on the carpet. The second door on the left had a small brass nameplate, Conference Room B. I put my hand on the door handle. Through the door, I could hear voices, Dana's, my mother's, the lower register of Uncle Richard. Settled, easy, the sounds of people who had already decided how the room was going to go. I pressed the handle down and opened the door and walked in. Dana looked up first. Her expression shifted in a way I registered but did not react to, a flicker of something that was not quite surprise and not quite readiness, but somewhere between the two. "Grace," she said.
"Good morning," I said.
I sat down across from her, set my bag on the floor beside my chair, and folded my hands on the table. At the head of the table, Patricia Hargrove looked up from the folder in front of her. She had gray-streaked hair pulled back and the reading glasses of someone who used them constantly rather than occasionally, and was comfortable with that. She glanced at me once, briefly, and something in her expression did not change, and that itself was an answer. She said, "Now that everyone is here, we can begin." She opened the folder. Dana straightened in her chair. My mother picked up her pen. Uncle Richard cleared his throat. I rested my hands on the table and waited. Patricia Hargrove said, "Before I walk through the documents, I want to establish that what I have in front of me represents your grandmother's most recent estate directives, executed 14 months ago and witnessed, notarized, and filed with this office." My mother said, "I'm sorry, most recent?" "Eleanor Reed updated her estate documents 14 months ago," Ms. Hargrove said. "The version you may have been aware of previously was superseded at that time." Dana went still. I watched her go still. It was a specific kind of stillness, the stillness of a person whose architecture has just encountered a wall it didn't know was there. Her hands, which had been flat on the table, moved slightly, and then stopped. Superseded, Dana said. That's correct, Ms. Hargrove said. How no one told us she changed anything. She wasn't required to, Ms. Hargrove said. Her voice was level and unhurried, the voice of someone who had delivered this kind of information before and understood that the correct register was neither apologetic nor pointed. The documents are valid and properly executed. I've reviewed them thoroughly. Are you ready to proceed? Dana looked at my mother. My mother looked at Uncle Richard. Uncle Richard looked at the table. I said nothing. I kept my hands where they were and my face where it was, and I let the silence in that room do what silence did. Ms. Hargrove looked at me, briefly, across the table. Then she reached for the folder. Patricia Hargrove opened the folder and laid the first page flat on the table. I watched Dana's eyes move to it. I watched them move across the text, not reading it yet, scanning it the way a person scans something when they're trying to understand the shape of a problem before they understand its details. Her jaw was set. Her hands were in her lap now, which was different from where they had been. The primary document, Ms. Hargrove said, is a revised trust and estate directive executed 14 months ago. Eleanor Reed made several material changes at that time. My mother said, "What kind of changes?" "Substantive ones," Ms. Hargrove said. She did not look up from the folder. I'll walk through each element. First, the property at 1114, Wisteria Lane. The house. Grandma's house. The ash tree and the lavender smell, and the 41 Thursday drives. The property was placed in a revocable living trust at the time of the update, Ms. Hargrove said. The trust designates a sole beneficiary. Dana said, "Who?" Ms. Hargrove looked up. She looked at me, not at Dana, and in the 2 seconds before she spoke, I felt the pressure behind my eyes again. Not grief this time, but something older and harder to name. Something that had been building for 3 years of Thursdays and 4 months of silence and 2 hours in a parking lot across from a church. Grace Eleanor Reed, Ms. Hargrove said. The room was very quiet. My mother made a sound, not a word, just a sound, the sound of air moving through a person who has stopped their breath suddenly, and then restarted it. Dana said nothing. I watched her face. She did not collapse. She did not raise her voice. She went the particular white of someone whose certainty has just had its floor removed, and she sat very still, and she looked at me. I looked back at her. I did not say anything. I kept my hands on the table and my face arranged in the expression of a person who is listening, because that was what I was, a person who was listening, who had been listening for a very long time. That can't be right, Dana said finally. Her voice was controlled. I will give her that. She kept it controlled. Grandma didn't. She would have said something. She would have told us. She wasn't obligated to, Ms. Hargrove said. When did she? You said 14 months ago. That's January of last year, Ms. Hargrove said. The documents were properly witnessed and notarized. They are not contestable on procedural grounds. I want to see them, Dana said. Of course. Ms. Hargrove slid copies across the table. One to Dana, one to my mother, one to Uncle Richard. I had my own copy. It was in the manila folder in my bag and had been there since 2 weeks ago, when Ms. Hargrove had sent it to me as the named trust beneficiary. But that was not the thing I was going to produce in this room. That was not the object I had carried for 4 months in the drawer of my home office. Dana read. My mother read. Uncle Richard read, and then set the paper down and looked at the window. This doesn't make sense, Dana said. The house is worth, she stopped. We had an estimate of $390,000 to $400,000, Ms. Hargrove said, with the neutrality of someone who had done this precise dance before. That's the realtor's assessment. The trust value is recorded at $350,000 for estate purposes, which is within standard range. And Grace gets all of it, Dana said. Not a question. The property in its entirety, yes, Ms. Hargrove said. There are additional elements to the estate, which I'll come to. I reached down to my bag. I had thought about this moment, not obsessively, not strategically, but in the quiet and considered way I thought about things that mattered. I had thought about whether to bring the envelope at all, since Ms. Hargrove already had the filed copies. But I had decided to bring it, because the envelope was the thing I had been the keeper of, The thing Grandma had pressed to the bottom of her nightstand drawer and trusted me not to open, and it deserved to be in the room. Not as evidence, as testimony. I set the cream-colored envelope on the table in front of me. Dana's eyes went to it immediately.
"What is that?" she said.
"This is the copy Grandma kept at home," I said. "She gave it to me for safekeeping. I haven't opened it. You've had that since." "Since January," I said.
"Since she passed."
I took it from her nightstand the day after the funeral. The one I wasn't allowed to attend. I said that last part quietly, without emphasis. I was not performing anything. It was simply the accurate sequence of events, and I felt it was relevant to say it in this room, at this table, in front of the people who had organized the vote. My mother's pen was motionless on the table. Uncle Richard looked at the envelope and then looked at his hands. I broke the wax seal. I had not opened it at home. I had not opened it in my car, or in the coffee shop 2 blocks away, or at any point in the 4 months I had carried it. I broke it here, in this room, with all of them watching, because this was where it had always been meant to be opened. The documents inside were folded in thirds. I opened them. The top page carried the Hargrove and Associates letterhead, and below it, in the clear and careful handwriting I had known since I was 5 years old, was my grandmother's signature. Eleanor may read. Dated January 14th of last year. I had driven her there on January 14th. I had sat in that waiting room for 50 minutes reading a 2-year-old magazine. I had driven her home. I turned the document so Dana could see the signature and the date, and I laid it flat on the table between us, and I did not say anything because the document said everything. Dana looked at it for a long time. She did this a year before she died. Dana said quietly. 14 months, I said. Why didn't she tell me? I considered the question. I considered it carefully because Dana had asked it in a way that was not defensive, in a register I had not heard from her before, something more hollow than combative, the voice of someone who had just understood something they could not ununderstand. I think, I said, she felt she already had. Dana looked up at me. She showed up at her appointments, I said. Every one of them. She sat in the waiting rooms. She kept the medication logs and replaced the floor when it went soft and cleared the gutters twice a year. That was the language she used to say what she meant. I think she assumed the people who were paying attention could read it. Dana said nothing. I didn't need her to. Ms. Hargrove gave a small, deliberate pause and then continued. The remainder of the estate, the savings account, which held $14,200, and the personal property, was divided evenly 4 ways, per the original terms that had remained unchanged. The china cabinet, the rocking chair, the writing desk, the pearl earrings, those went through the standard distribution. The house did not. My mother said at one point, "Grace, I want you to know I didn't." "I know," I said. "The vote was." "I know," I said again. I said it without anger. I meant it without anger. The anger had never been the point. The point had been this. A room, a table, a sealed envelope opened at the right moment, in the right company, in front of the people who needed to see it. The point had been patience, which was a form of respect, for the process, for the documents, for the woman who had made them. Uncle Richard, at some point near the end of the meeting, said, "Eleanor always knew what she was doing." "Yes," I said. "She was the smartest person in any room she was in." "Yes," I said. "She was." Ms. Hargrove walked through the remaining procedural steps, transfer timeline, title paperwork, the steps for formally closing the trust. She gave me a packet of documents. She shook my hand when we stood to leave and held it a half-second longer than a standard handshake, which I understood. Dana left first. She didn't say anything on the way out. She put on her coat and picked up her bag and walked to the door with her shoulders level and her chin level and her face arranged in an expression I had no name for. Not shame, exactly. Not grief. Something quieter and more durable than both. I watched her go. I folded my grandmother's copy of the documents and put them back in the cream-colored envelope and put the envelope in my bag, beside the manila folder. I put on my coat. I walked out of Hargrove and Associates into the thin March sunlight and stood on the sidewalk for a moment with my hand on the strap of my bag and my face turned slightly up toward the sky. The flower stand across the street was fully open now. Someone was buying yellow tulips, handing over a bill, wrapping the paper around the stems. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the bag on my shoulder, the notebooks, the envelope, the 4 months of patient and ordinary accumulation, and then I walked to my car. I did not go straight home. I drove to Grandma's house. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment with the engine off. The ash tree was beginning to show the first very faint suggestions of buds, not leaves yet, just the swelling at the ends of branches that meant spring was deciding to show up. I had not noticed that on the drive to the coffee shop this morning. I noticed it now. I let myself in with the key. The house was quiet and had the particular stillness of a place that has been walked through by people settling things and had not yet settled itself back into a new normal. The cabinet by the television was still open. The chair was still 6 inches from where Grandma kept it. I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water from the tap, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the backyard. The backyard was small and tidy. A bird bath Grandma had bought at a church sale in 1987 stood at the center of it, dry now and waiting for the season. A row of dormant rose bushes lined the back fence, stubby and bare and entirely ready. I drank the water. I thought about what I had said in that room. She assumed the people who were paying attention could read it. I had meant it as an observation about Grandma. But standing in her kitchen, I understood it was also something I had learned from her. The idea that care was legible to the people who chose to look and illegible to the people who didn't, and that the difference between those two groups was not intelligence or proximity, but attention. Attention was a choice. It had always been a choice. I had chosen it 42 times. I set the glass in the sink. I walked through the living room and straightened the chair, put it back to where Grandma had always kept it, the exact position I had memorized without meaning to, the way you memorize the details of a place you have loved without marking the moment you started. I closed the cabinet by the television. I stood in the front hallway for a moment. The mirror was still on the wall. Dana's name had been on the spreadsheet next to it, but the spreadsheet was a document Dana had made, not a legal instrument, and the mirror was personal property, which meant it went through the standard 4-way distribution like everything else except the house. I did not know whether I would end up with it. I did not know whether I wanted it, specifically. What I knew was that I was going to keep the house.
Not to prove something.
Not to hold it over anyone. I was going to keep it because it was Grandma's and she had left it to me, and it had a bathroom floor I had tiled with my own hands and gutters I had cleared twice with a rented ladder, and 41 Thursdays embedded in every room of it like something that couldn't be removed because it had become structural. I was going to keep it and take care of it the way I had always taken care of things because that was what I did, and because Grandma had known I would, and because that was precisely why she had made the decision she made on January 14th in a law office on Clement Street. I locked the front door behind me. I put the key back in my pocket. I drove home with the ash tree in the rearview mirror again, and this time I watched it all the way to the corner. I want to leave you with something Grandma said to me. On the last Thursday, I visited her before she died, 9 days before, which I did not know at the time, which is the way it usually goes with last times. She was in the rocking chair by the front window, and I was on the couch with the medication log open on my knee, going through the week. She looked out the window for a while without saying anything, which was not unusual. Then she said, "Gracie, the people who want something from you will always be loudest right before they realize you've already decided." I asked her what she meant. She looked at me with the particular expression she had when she said something she considered obvious, and was gently surprised that it required explanation. She said, "Let them vote. You just keep being the one who shows up." I wrote it in the running inventory column of the 4th notebook. Not because I thought I needed to remember it, I knew I would remember it without writing it down, but because I was the one who kept things, and some things deserve to be kept in ink. If you have been the quiet one, the one who showed up and documented and drove the 40 minutes and sat in the waiting room and said nothing when you had every right to say everything, I want you to know that the record you are keeping is real, even when no one is reading it. Your patience is not submission. It is evidence. Share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Let them vote. You just keep showing up.